go
Okay.
forward.
All right, great.
Where we feel comfortable looking.
I like looking at people.
So as someone who has been executive producer for all things Batman, how was it going from film to theater?
Going from movies to theater was a completely unique experience. I have spent a career in everything from comic books and graphic novels to movies, what used to be called TV and we now call streaming, animation, and this was something new. And one of the things I've learned in my long journey is that know what you know, but know what you don't know. So it was important to me for Broadway that I get involved with people and company that really knew how to do it and how to do it great. So I'm with the Nederlander organization of Broadway, which owns about half the Broadway theaters. And I rely on them. These are good people. I rely on them to steer me. And even though I have maybe final approval of certain things, I don't make a move unless they explain to me the ramifications of it and why their thoughts are this way. So it is a wonderful, wonderful relationship going forward.
It's awesome.
And what is it about Batman that inspired this particular, like a Broadway, that's humongous, you know, I've never seen anything like that with that kind of character.
No, but keep in mind that this is not going to be Spider-Man, the Broadway play, where he's going to be wind up swinging upside down, smashing into the scenery because he's tangled up in the ropes. This is not that. This is not a play about Batman. This is not a play about Michael making Batman movies. This is a play about a fanboy, about a kid who grew up geeky because I had a passion that was different than mostly all the other kids, about a kid who went out at 8 years old to play Little League and was a star at striking out. And it's about the super villains in my life, like my Little League coach, who pulled me aside after one game and screamed in my face and said, at 8 years old, you're worthless. You cost this team the game. Get out of my sight. You're a clown. And I went back to the treehouse that my dad built for me, where I had my comic books stashed. And I got lost in a world of comic books and superheroes. And now I was hanging out with Superman and Spider-Man and all these great guys. And so my play is about community. It's about those of us who maybe from time to time have been ostracized, not welcomed into certain areas, but through Comic-Cons and through social media and through just the shared experience of going to comic book movies, we formed this community. And this is about every one of us who love our superheroes, who learned from them. Batman absolutely impacted my ethical and moral code when I was growing up. And all my friends say the same thing. Not just Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, all of them. We cherish Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and all those incredible creators. And as I've said, most of them were denigrated during their lives, during their careers, because society looked down their nose at comic books. Man, I'm older than all of you guys by far, so you weren't around when comic books... If the guy at the drugstore saw me buying a comic book when I was over 10 or 11, he said, oh, this has got to be a sociopath, or there's something wrong with this guy mentally. And that's what we had. The fact that comic book movies are now date movies, that there's Comic-Con is 50% female, this is completely unheard of in my life. Completely unheard of. Comic books made me date challenged when I was in high school. When I was 16 and 17 and then a girl found out I still read comic books, forget it. Nothing happened in there. So the fact that it could be this kind of a story about the impact that superheroes can have on our lives, about what a passion can do for you if you're willing to get up off the couch and turn it into your work and follow it like a through line. Batman was my through line. My life I always saw as superheroes and supervillains. My parents sacrificed everything for me and my brother. Even though they had, these geeky, strange kids, they sacrificed everything. They were my first superheroes. I had 2 teachers, 7th and 8th grade English teachers, that changed my life, convinced me I was creative and I could do creative things and write creatively, and one day I could even make it my work. At the premiere in New York of our first Batman movie in 1989, I found Mrs. Stiller and I found Mrs. Friedman down in Florida, and I brought them up and sent a limousine to bring them to the premiere. And I told everybody at the premiere what I've just told you. And I said, if you ask these 2 ladies, who are real-life superheroes, if they had everything they ever wanted out of their careers, they would tell you they did, but I know there's one thing they did not have, and that's a standing ovation. And my 2 teachers got a standing ovation that night. That was an 8th grade fantasy come true. So I've always recognized mentors and people like that. But I've also recognized people like my Little League coach, who were the super villains of my life. They were the jokers. They were my blockbusters. And I always saw life through that lens. So the point in time came when I went to the president of DC Comics and said, I want to buy the rights to Batman. I want to start making dark and serious Batman movies. I need to show the world he's not a comedian. He's not the joke that people were laughing at, the pot-bellied guy with the Pow-Zaps and the Whams. I want them to see how he was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in 1939 as a creature of the night who stalks deeply disturbed villains. And the president of DC Comics was like a father to me. He goes, I don't know if you ever saw the poster for Home Alone.
Yes.
He looked like that. He says, Michael, for God's sake, don't do this. I don't want to see you lose all your money. Son, don't you understand, since Batman went off the air, the brand is as dead as a dodo. Nobody's interested in Batman anymore. I said, yeah, but Sol, nobody's ever made a movie that's dark and serious about a comic book superhero. It's going to be like a new form of entertainment. He goes, is there any way I can talk you out of this, Michael? I go, no. He said, all right, come on in. So I'm in my 20s. Sorry, but I'm a kid in my 20s. I raised money privately. It took 6 months to negotiate the deal. On October 3rd, 1979, I signed the papers, I paid the money, and I bought the rights to Batman. I put it in my back pocket. I fly out to LA. I'm turned down by every single studio, basically thrown out of their offices. Worst idea they ever heard. What are you kidding? Dark superheroes? You can't do that. You can't do serious comic book movies. You're crazy. My last turn down came from Columbia at a time when they had a movie, Annie, that came out. Mm-hmm. And this older production executive said, son, you're nuts. Batman will never be a successful movie because our movie, Annie, has not done well. Are you talking about that little red-headed girl from Broadway that sings the song Tomorrow? He goes, yeah. I go, well, what does that have to do with Batman? Oh, come on, Michael. They're both out of the funny pages.
Oh.
That was my rejection from Columbia. So if any of you say, well, how does a kid in his 20s buy the rights to Batman? It's inconceivable. It's impossible. But now you know the context of the times, and it's a very unglamorous answer. Nobody else on the planet Earth showed up but me. And then I go out to do it. I'm turned down by every company. And as a result, from the time I bought the rights till we got our first movie made in 1989 with Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, 10 years. 10 years of rejection, 10 years of people telling you you suck. And you have to look deep inside yourself. It tests your mettle as a human being. Is everybody right and I'm just being stubborn? Or do I really truly believe in this? And do I really truly believe in myself? I kept coming up with the other answer. So the question became, how for 10 years do you hang on by your fingertips to get to where you want to go? And if you shut your eyes for a few seconds and think of where you guys were 10 years ago, that's a long frickin' time. And that's the story that I want to bring. It's uplifting. It's a victory in the end. It's about perseverance and commitment, getting up off your ass, getting up off the couch, never taking no for an answer, never letting the frustration strangle you, never letting the bad guys win. But you can only do that if you have a support system. And I had parents, I had a brother, I have a wife, I had comic book fans that sustained me, during that period of time and helped me get to the finish line in 10 years. So the play is funny. It's going to be very entertaining. It's going to be very emotional. But I want people to walk out inspired. And whether it's called The Boy Who Loved Batman or The Girl Who Loved Batman or The Person Who Loved Batman, it's about all of us. And I want everybody to know that.
You're touching upon all of us. How important was it for you that through Legion M and Indiegogo, the fans were able to be a part of this Broadway process?
Oh my God, it was essential. It was absolutely essential. I am madly in love with Legion M and everything they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it. And the fact that a chunk of this production is fan-financed is great. And not only that, we had one play reading at Grauman's Chinese Theater in LA. We did 2 play readings in a Broadway theater in Times Square. And we had Legion people come out, and not just investors, not just people who were being brought in and agents and big time this and big time that. We had fans there. And then afterwards I was able to engage with them and talk, what'd you think? What worked? What didn't work? Do you think we're on the right track? So I was able to get really valuable input from them as well.
So the Batman franchise, this dark and gritty Batman franchise, grew significantly in even its lore. How did that and the fans' adoration influence this play?
Tremendously. It's a tremendous influence because the more fans I interacted with, whether it's at Comic-Cons and doing Q&A, or it's at universities, speaking at universities, or even business conferences, I got to see how important Batman is to people everywhere. And I've spoken in Thailand, I've spoken in China, I've spoken all over the world. And I found, 3 times I've been asked to speak at the United Nations. And I was in a room, everybody's on the headset, everybody speaks a different language, everybody worships a different God, comes from a different culture, has different politics. And I didn't even know if any of them sitting there would even have heard of Batman. And here's the Jewish boy from North Jersey leading the session in the UN, right? By the time we were done, we had all completely bonded, realizing that despite what the politicians are telling us about how different we all are, despite the media telling us how different we all are, we found a commonality and a bond in our love for comics and cartoons and movies. And by the end of the session, everybody was taking selfies together. Everybody was exchanging email addresses. It was like the last day of summer camp. Please don't forget to write. It was magic. And to me, it proved the power of what we have here. And you can't just leave it in movies, TV, animation, and gaming. If you have an opportunity now to bring it to Broadway, which is a very, very different audience, let's go there. Let's go there. What's the worst thing that can happen? We close after one night, and I say, I made it to Broadway.
I don't know, have you casted anybody yet?
No, we have not. We're just starting to talk about it. There are quiet lists starting to be made, and there's a couple of concepts being tossed about, which is really, really exciting. I've asked my wife to help with the casting. Because she knows me pretty well. We're about to sell, next week is our 49th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's a Hollywood record. We actually met the first day of our freshman year of college. She was 17, and she wasn't even unpacked from her dorm room when we went out for the first time, which my kids are very grateful for. So her 2 cents is worth $1. And so everybody's got something to say. I have in my head different things, and it's weird. It's a very bizarre thing. I was in a creative meeting, I'm going, now wait a minute, guys. I don't think 10-year-old Michael would say that. And I'm going, oh, holy shit, I'm talking about myself in the third person. This is bizarre, but it's fun. It really is fun. So I think the casting is going to be unique and interesting.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
What is it about Batman, the character, Batman's moral code, that makes him timeless?
Some of the things that Batman has taught me, and a lot of it we've tried to emulate in the movies. Why do we fall? So we can learn how to pick ourselves up. Success of a person is not measured by what they achieve, but by how hard they try. some of it is just the most basic stuff that, you know, everybody should be taught by parents or whatever you believe in. We're now in this weird time period in this country of polarization, of the lack of civility, people talking at each other, not with each other anymore. And I think you got to turn to Batman and the superheroes to learn how better to get along. I'm a huge, World's Finest Comics. It was a great comic for me as a little kid. Because here you have superpowers, Superman, hanging out with Batman and Robin, even though they had no superpowers. Sometimes he had to schlep them through the air, you know. But they had a camaraderie, they had a friendship that was undying. And I love seeing it as a kid. I love watching the Fantastic Four argue. Because I knew they were a family. And even though one guy was made of orange rocks and another guy was bursting into flames, it was just like my family. Except at age 14, it was probably me bursting into flames. But I could recognize that. The Incredibles is probably the best Fantastic Four movie made to date. So the concept of family is really, really strong in that. And the rest I leave to every individual to interpret for yourself what you get out of the codes of superheroes and the way it works. And I admit today's superheroes are different than the ones I grew up on, and there's a darker side. But at the end of the day, we're all in this sphere together. And if we don't figure out a way to get together, we're going to burn ourselves up. We're going to lose the last bits of water we have. We're going to bomb each other out of existence, and we are going to fast forward the new era of extinction. So our alternatives aren't great, and I think that comic books really help reach a lot of people and try to help them get through this and figure out a way to do it. And I think during COVID, I think reading comic book superhero adventures was an escape. And I think it was a pressure cooker valve. So I think it had a very important place. And now I'm rambling. But you start me talking about this stuff, you're going to have to shut me up.
No, I like it. So when you were first pitching a darker version of Batman, and you explained that 10 years there was just no, how were you able to tell a dark story and finally pitch it and have these executives finally see the light from the darkness?
One of the things that really helped in terms of the marketing of it was The Dark Knight Returns in 1986 and The Watchmen. At that moment, we were able to get some executives to say, oh, wait a minute, you mean these things are not for 8 to 12-year-old boys anymore? There's an adult audience for this? This is acceptable? This is, elevating the whole thing? So that helped change the mindset of the Hollywood structure of executives, agents, and all who had previously been part of the generation of what I call seduction of the innocent, where comic books were blamed for every malady that was taking place in the United States. So I think that was a turning point. That was really, really helpful. Tim Burton, having the right big idea for how to do it and how to make it work was huge. And if I can take a moment to share with you a little bit of that. Tim Burton came up with what I always call the big idea. His idea was so big that it not only got our movie made, it changed Hollywood forever, it changed the comic book industry, and it changed the world culture's perception of comic books and superheroes and supervillains. His big idea also was the thing that opened the door to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this was his big idea. He said, Michael, if we're going to do this as a serious movie, and we don't want to get unintentional laughs from the audience, this movie cannot be about Batman. Okay, that's when I crumbled into a heap of dust. He said, this movie has to be about Bruce Wayne. We have to show a Bruce Wayne so driven and so obsessed to the point of being psychotic that audiences will go, oh, that's a guy who would get dressed up as a bat and go out and do this. And that's why he wanted Michael Keaton and not Kevin Costner or Harrison Ford or Dennis Quaid. He said, I'll get unintentional laughs if I show them getting into a Bat costume, but not with Keaton. And that was all right. Now, why did I say it opened the door to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because think of it, those first Marvel movies, Iron Man, Spider-Man, they should have been called Tony Stark. They should have been called Peter Parker. It was Tim's big idea that was being executed now across the board. And Tim had one major corollary that went along with it, and it was about world building. He said from the opening frames, this movie, Gotham City, has to be the third most important character in the piece. Because if we can't get audiences to suspend their disbelief and buy into Gotham City, they will never believe a guy looking like Batman and looking like the Joker running around after each other. And he was absolutely right about that as well. Genius. I've been so fortunate. In 46 years in the business, I've worked with a bunch of people I now consider geniuses. Tim Burton, my dear friend Anton Furst, who was our production designer on the first Batman movie, designed Gotham City, the Batmobile, the whole look of the picture, won the Oscar. Chris Nolan. Todd Phillips, with what he did with Joker, and what he's about to do with Joker 2, which I promised everybody I would shut up and not share. Matt Reeves, what he accomplished with the Batman and showing Batman as the world's greatest detective in what was as close to a horror film as Silence of the Lambs. Chris Miller and Phil Lord with the Lego movie and Lego Batman.
Yes.
These guys are geniuses. These guys are geniuses. And the one thing I always mention in interviews, because they don't get the spotlight enough, are the brilliant people that do the animation. Bruce Timm, Eric Radowski, Alan Burnett, Paul Dini, Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy, the Queen, Andrea Romano, who does the voice casting and voice direction. They've given us the best Batman stories in all media. Mask of the Phantasm, the two-part Mr. Freeze episode, Under the Red Hood. I mean, I could go on and on, but they have done just a brilliant, brilliant job, and they just don't get enough of the spotlight.
People need to look at Harley. Like, she was in an episode, and now everyone loves her.
I can't talk about Joker 2.
Oh, wait, what? Oh, Nikki.
Oh,
Stay calm. No. That's her character.
We'll cut the cameras.
All right, okay.
How do you feel about, like, so they don't do a lot of television adaptations of Batman, but they're starting to. Now that Matt Reeves is going to do his own series after Batman, and then they had Gotham, and now Pennyworth is coming back. How do you feel about those, where they don't really, they take inspiration from the comics, but they really change, like, the origins of characters?
Did you ever see Teen Titans Go to the Movies?
I haven't.
Yes. Yes.
All right, Teen Titans Go to the Movies is written on 2 levels. It is very funny for fans. And by the way, it's the only time Stan Lee has done a cameo in a DC movie. And poor Robin, all he wants is his own movie. And he's waiting and waiting, and then instead they give it to Alfred. And then they give it to the Batmobile. And it's like coming next, you know, the utility belt gets its own movie. So there's such a thing, a danger as oversaturation. It is what kills the golden goose. The other thing that's a danger is if things become cookie cutter and the movies just seem to be one after another, the same formulaic stuff. That will kill everything. So when I see Marvel's Deadpool, I get excited. When I see Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, I get excited because they're pushing the envelope. Joker being bold and daring and pushing the envelope. Matt Reeves pushing the envelope and not just turning out old stuff. So I am a worrier of oversaturation. And how much do we need? How much really has to be out there? I will leave it to the decision makers as to how much the audiences can stand without getting frustrated. And leave it to them to do things in a quality way. My preference is don't tell the story of the supervillains in grade school and high school. Leave it ambiguous. That's part of the attraction of the Batman villains. You don't need to know the true origin of the Joker. You don't. Let something play in your mind. You don't have to know every detail about the Mad Hatter. leave it unclear, leave something to everybody to bring to the table. So, but that's just me and I can be wrong.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Someone like myself, I grew up loving Mask of the Phantasm, Red Hood. For new Batman fans, the younger generations, what would you say to them to introduce them to this new world of Batman?
Well, the first thing I would say, Michael at age 15 would club me over the head into unconsciousness for saying it. And it is that when the Batman TV show was out, it was the only interpretation the whole world had of Batman. And it was horrifying. Today, we have multiple interpretations of Batman. And we've actually done Batman meets Scooby-Doo
Yes.
as a movie. And Lego Batman and all kinds. I now embrace that 60s TV show as a mechanism to bring young kids into the Batman franchise. And then let them grow up from there and Scooby-Doo to Batman Brave and Bold to superhero girls to this, till they can get at a point where they can appreciate the movies and the gaming. So I now have a welcome place in my heart for it today. The other thing I'm very proud of is Warner Brothers Animation is exploring the multicultural and diverse aspects of Batman. So we have Batman Ninja, and another one coming up. You're shortly going to see Aztec Batman. And this is working with a Mexican studio, working with a Japanese studio, and there's more to come. And I think that's a really, really good thing. I just got back from India, and they are crazy about Batman and Archie.
Yes.
It's the biggest world market for Archie. And I wrote the best-selling Archie comics ever. I wrote Archie Gets Married, and which they turned into a coffee table book in a slipcase. So when I spoke in India, they said, "Oh, great, we're glad you're talking about Batman, but speak about Archie, which was really fun. And now they're doing an Indian version of Archie comics, which is interesting. I don't think it's going to work, because the reason Archie's so popular in India is they see it as the gateway to understanding what American teenagers are dressing like, talking like, listening to, what they're doing after school. And I think if they start making it Indian, it's going to pull away the reason that they've been following it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So I think that's part of it. And I think that, but if the diversity of it is not organic, if it's not authentic, if it comes across as the latest gimmick to sell a comic book, everybody's going to fall flat on their face. And if that means instead of using old characters that overnight suddenly change their perspective, maybe it's time to invent some new ones and maintain the authenticity and the truth to them. So I'm all in favor of that, and I'm very, very happy to see it finally happen.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much
Thank
for
you
talking
all.
with us.
If you're around at 6:45 tonight, 6D&E, we're going to announce the Broadway show. It should be a lot of fun.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
If you like that video, make sure to like and subscribe.
Subscribe to our Patreon where you get our reactions a week early, uncut before it goes to YouTube.
You can book us on Cameo, where you can make Hannah sing happy birthday.
I will not be singing happy birthday.
You can ask us to say hello, a small reaction request, or make Hannah sing happy birthday.
Our merch store is now up with brand new designs coming, as well as our old designs brought to you by my Manic Episodes. Thank you for that.
Make sure to check out our OnlyFans.
Oh my god! Subscribe to our OnlyFans for a different side of fandom reactions.
And be sure to follow our Twitter and Instagram at FandomReactGirls for daily updates.